Hi everyone! Today we'll be looking at how paths work in Open Roller Coaster Tycoon 2 and some different ways that you can use the Tile Inspector to hack your paths. This video is a follow-up to the Tile Inspector 101 video, so make sure you check that out first to get some background on the Tile Inspector and the basics of how to use it. Pathing in Roller Coaster Tycoon is one of the most fundamental mechanics of the game. Building a piece of path allows peeps to walk on a tile. Build a second piece and the game connects them together, allowing you to build routes that make up the structure of your park. It's an intuitive and effective system. But we can also abuse this system using OpenRCT2. Using the Tile Inspector, we can edit various properties of paths to get some new and interesting behaviors. Let's open the Tile Inspector and select a piece of path. At the bottom of the Properties pane, we see an array of checkboxes called Connected Edges. As I mentioned, the game will automatically connect adjacent pieces of path, and we can look at and edit these connections here. The four central checkboxes are for the edges of the path pieces. Connecting these edges changes both the functionality and appearance of a path piece. When an edge is connected, that means a peep will be able to leave the path in that direction. However, if a path isn't connected at all, a peep can exit in any direction to prevent them from getting stuck. It will also change the way the path looks visually. For each connected edge, the path will extend in that direction, and for each unconnected edge, we will see any path additions like lamps, benches, and bins. The four other checkboxes are for the corners of the path. They don't affect how a piece of path behaves, only how it looks. You may want to check a corner if the two adjacent edges are connected and you want to fill in the gap between them. Let's look at a simple example of adjusting connected edges. Here is a single piece of path with no connected edges. The peep is trying to leave, but cannot since there is no adjacent path to travel to. If we connect one path edge, we can now see the path visually extends in that direction. The peep will now attempt to leave the tile in that direction, and won't try to leave the tile in any other direction. If we place two pieces of path next to each other, the game will connect them at the shared edge. This peep can walk freely between the two. Let's see what happens if we use the Tile Inspector to disconnect just one of the paths, and instead connect it in a different direction. Now that path is no longer visually connected. However, a peep can still walk towards it from the other path. Once they do, they are trapped there since there are no connected edges towards the tile they started on. You could use this technique to make one-way paths without the use of Do Not Enter banners. Just be sure not to trap your guests if you do. One interesting side effect of adjusting connected edges is how queues work. Normally, a queue path can only ever have two connections, since we need to direct peeps towards the ride's entrance. However, the Tile Inspector allows us to add extra connected edges to a queue. If we do, the queue surface will disappear since there are no sprites in the game for it. You would normally never see a queue like this. However, we can still see the queue's supports, if it's raised above the ground, and any lamps or TVs we have added to it. This is a neat trick to get different looking paths, or to place lamps in places without seeing path under them. This trick can also now be accomplished with the new invisible path that was recently added to OpenRCT2, but I did want to also mention how it can be done with queues. Let's explore a bit more how peeps behave when navigating your paths. During normal gameplay, if you try to build a path where one already exists, the game will replace the old path with the new one. However, with the Tile Inspector, we can place several pieces of path in the same exact spot. This can be used to get some unique visual effects. The key thing to remember is this: if you have multiple pieces of path at the same coordinates and the same height, peeps will only care about the one that is lowest in the Tile Inspector's list. With this in mind, let's start with this simple layout. This area only has one piece of path per tile. Let's copy one of those pieces and paste it in the same place. Now we have two paths on this tile, but remember, peeps will only navigate using the bottom one. That means I can adjust the path edges of the top one in any way I like, and it will not affect the peeps' behavior. If we now make the top piece have a connection this way, and hide the bottom piece, it will look like peeps could navigate in that direction, but choose not to. Of course, this is an illusion. The peeps don't even know there is path over here at all. This is called path proxying. We can apply this over a large area to control path finding as much as we like. For example, let's say we have an area with a large parking lot, and we want to make sure that our peeps don't get lost in it and only walk around the edges. Let's do this by first building our functioning path. I've used the red path for clarity. It goes around the edge of the parking lot here, and none of the path edges are connected except where we want peeps to walk. Once this is done, we can copy and paste tarmac path pieces on top of the red path. Even though these pieces are connected to the rest of the parking lot, peeps can't see them and will ignore them entirely. This gives us the illusion that peeps are smart enough to navigate around the parking lot, when in reality we've simply forced them to do so. Another useful thing we can do with the Tile Inspector is to change the appearance of ride queues. If you don't like the look of the queues that come with the game, but aren't using custom queues, you can still get nice looking ones by layering multiple paths on top of each other. Here are 2 common techniques you can use. For the first technique, simply copy and paste plain footpath over your queue and make the actual queue invisible. Your peeps will still queue as normal, but the queue can now be made of any path you like. Just be sure to always keep the queue lower in the Tile Inspector. If you break the queue by accidentally deleting pieces or layering them incorrectly, it can be difficult or at least annoying to fix, and since the banner will not be visible, it's possible to break the queue without even realizing it until your peeps are already lost. Another method is to paste path on top of the queue without making the queue invisible. If you do this, you will still be able to see the queue railings and scrolling sign, which you may prefer. Using this method, paste 2 pieces of proxy path instead of just 1 to avoid visual glitching. You can also use proxy path for decoration. For example, if you have a large open plaza area, you can take a piece of unconnected path and paste it anywhere for some extra visual texture. Remember to keep the unconnected piece above the real path in the Tile Inspector. Interestingly, if that piece of path has additions like benches or bins, guests will actually be able to use them even though they don't use them for pathfinding. And that's all I'm going to cover in this video about paths. There are still even more fun tricks you can do and plenty that I didn't talk about here. As always, I encourage you to play around and see if you can find an interesting feature or effect I didn't mention. I hope this video was helpful. If there's something you'd like to see in the future, let me know in the comments.